21:07 p.m. The crystal chandeliers explode into light inside a venue said to be worth millions of dollars. Violins rise above the deep pulse of orchestral music. Cameras flash in relentless bursts. And according to multiple sources, some of the most recognizable faces in global entertainment arrive at once. All eyes drawn to a single figure, stepping slowly into the center of it all. Ini Edo, at 44. Radiant in a breathtaking white gown that seems to shimmer with every step. And beside her stands Philip Ehiaguina, the man many believe has rewritten the final chapters of her story, a story that, for years, was whispered about with pain, loss, and quiet heartbreak. But even as applause fills the room, there are murmurs beneath the surface. Subtle glances exchanged, questions forming. Is this truly the fairy tale ending, or just another beginning layered over wounds that never fully healed? Because long before this night of diamonds and champagne, there were moments that, according to those close to her, nearly broke her completely. Rewind to years earlier, when fame surrounded Ini Edo like a golden cage. Red carpets, flashing lights, admiration from millions. Yet behind closed doors, according to insiders, there were nights of silence. A phone left face down on a glass table, unread messages, a half-finished drink slowly losing its chill, and a woman staring into the distance as if searching for something she couldn't name. Some claim her past relationships carried shadows of disappointment. Others suggest there were betrayals that cut deeper than the public ever saw. Moments where trust fractured quietly, without scandal, without headlines. Just a slow, painful unraveling. And then there was the pressure, the expectations of love, marriage, and time, especially as the years passed, with whispers growing louder. Why hasn't she found the right one? What went wrong? Questions that, according to many, echoed far louder in private than they ever did online. And yet, through it all, she remained composed, smiling in interviews, walking with confidence, even as, behind the scenes, according to those who worked closely with her, there were days when the weight became almost unbearable. Then, somewhere along that uncertain timeline, Philip Ehiaguina enters the picture, not with a dramatic announcement, not with headlines, but quietly, almost unnoticed at first. A presence that, as some describe, felt different, calmer, more grounded, someone who didn't arrive with noise, but with consistency, and according to several accounts, that was what changed everything. Small moments began to shift. A message answered quickly, a laugh that lingered longer than expected. A sense, perhaps, that something real was forming. Something not built for the cameras, but for the spaces in between. And yet, even that didn't come without tension. Because when a heart has been tested before, it doesn't open easily. There were hesitations, pauses, nights where doubt crept back in, reminders of what once was, and what could happen again. But step by step, moment by moment, according to those who observed from a distance, something began to rebuild. Trust. Fragile at first, then stronger, until it reached a point where the past no longer held the same power. And so we arrive back at this night, this wedding that many are already calling the event of the year, a $1 million celebration, a spectacle of love, phrases repeated across media and whispered among guests. But beyond the luxury, beyond the glittering gowns and polished speeches, there's something quieter unfolding, something almost invisible unless you're looking closely. The way her hand lingers in his for just a second longer. The way he leans in when she speaks. as if the noise around them fades away completely. And yet, even here, even now, there's a trace of something else, something unspoken. Because love stories like this, shaped by years of uncertainty, don't erase the past. They carry it forward, subtly, quietly, woven into every smile, every glance, every pause between words. And as the music softens, as guests begin to drift toward the exits, as the lights dim just slightly, there's a moment, barely noticeable, where Ini Edo turns her head, her expression unreadable for a split second, as if remembering something far away, something only she can see. And in that fleeting silence, with the echoes of celebration still hanging in the air, it almost feels like the story isn't ending here at all, but continuing, somewhere just beyond the light. Rewind the clock, back to a time when Ini Edo stood at the very peak of her career. The spotlight followed her everywhere, premieres, interviews, endorsements. A life that, on the surface, seemed flawless. Yet according to many sources, behind that brilliance, her past marriage was quietly unraveling, not with loud scandals, but with something far more unsettling. Silence. Long, unexplained silences. Moments when she would appear at events alone, smiling, composed, yet noticeably distant. Photos began to circulate. Ini Edo standing by herself at gatherings where she was once accompanied, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore, and in interviews, there were shifts, small but telling. Questions about love gently redirected, answers shortened, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Many believe that behind that restraint, there was something deeper, something she was choosing not to reveal. And according to those said to be close to her at the time, the nights were the hardest. A room lit by a single lamp, the faint glow reflecting off untouched surfaces. A phone placed face down on the table, as if avoiding what might appear on the screen. Messages unread, or perhaps messages that never came. The air heavy with questions that had no answers, and in those quiet hours, as some suggest, doubt began to take root. Slowly, persistently. Was love ever truly what she thought it was? Or had it all been an illusion carefully held together until it could no longer stand? The tension grew, not in explosive arguments, but in the spaces between words, the hesitation before speaking, the distance that widened even when standing in the same room. And then came the breaking point. Not a single moment, but a series of realizations, each one more painful than the last. Trust, once fractured, becoming almost impossible to rebuild. And with that, according to multiple accounts, came the collapse. A separation that many saw coming, yet few truly understood. Because what the public witnessed was only the surface. Beneath it, there was said to be a profound sense of loss, not just of a partner, but of belief itself. Belief in promises, in permanence, in love that lasts, and for a long time after. According to those who followed her journey closely, Ini Edo seemed to retreat, not from her career, but from the idea of opening her heart again. There were appearances, smiles, success. But something had shifted, something quieter, more guarded, as if every emotion now carried a layer of caution, every connection measured, every possibility weighed against the memory of what had once fallen apart. And so the question lingered, whispered by fans, echoed by those who claimed to know her story. Had she, at some point, truly lost faith in love? Had the pain, the doubt, the silent nights, reshaped the way she saw everything that came after? And if so, what could possibly have been strong enough to make her believe again? And then, at a moment no one truly expected, Philip Ehayaguina appears, not with headlines, not with grand declarations, but quietly, almost like a presence that had always been there, unnoticed at first. And according to multiple sources, that was exactly what made it different. Because while the world was still watching Ini Edo through the lens of her past, he was, as some describe, already standing beside her during the moments no one else could see. The difficult days, the uncertain nights, the quiet spaces where doubt still lingered. And it began with the smallest details, the kind most people would overlook. A message replied to in the middle of the night. Not hours later, not the next day, but almost instantly, as if he understood that timing, in certain moments, meant everything. Then, according to those familiar with their story, there were trips, discreet, unannounced, no cameras, no social media, just two people stepping away from the noise, creating a space where nothing else existed. And somewhere within those moments, something fragile began to take shape, something that didn't demand attention, but slowly earned it. And then there were the glimpses, brief, almost accidental. A hand held for just a second longer than expected, a gesture so quick it could have been missed, yet enough to make those watching pause, enough to make people wonder. Could this be something real, or just another passing chapter? Because while hope began to surface, so did doubt. Friends, according to some accounts, noticed the change first. A softness returning to her voice, a lightness in her laughter that hadn't been there for years, a sense that the guarded walls were, slowly, coming down. Fans, too, began to feel it, subtle at first, then growing stronger, whispers turning into quiet excitement. Maybe this time, maybe this was different, but not. Everyone was convinced. There were still questions, still skepticism, voices reminding others of what had happened before, of how easily things can seem perfect until they're not. And so the tension built, quietly, beneath the surface. Hope, fragile and hesitant, standing side by side with fear, the kind of fear that comes from having believed once and lost everything. And yet, despite it all, according to those who observed closely, Ini Edo didn't rush. She didn't fall blindly. Every step was measured, every moment tested, as if she was asking herself the same question over and over again. Can this truly be trusted? Can this truly last? And as time moved forward, the rhythm of the story began to shift, slowly at first, then faster, doubt giving way to cautious belief, belief growing into something steadier, something that, little by little, started to feel like hope, real hope, the kind that doesn't arrive loudly, but builds quietly, until one day, it's strong enough to be seen. And yet, even as that hope took shape, the questions still remained, lingering in every glance, every whispered conversation, every silent pause between them. Was this finally the moment where everything would change, or was it only the calm, before something no one was ready for? Back to the present. The $1 million wedding night unfolds in full brilliance. The music swells. Fireworks erupt across the sky in waves of gold and silver. And according to multiple sources, this is being called one of the most extravagant weddings of the year. A spectacle designed not just to celebrate love, but to make the world stop and watch. Powerful names fill the room, global icons, industry figures, every guest carrying influence, every arrival adding to the weight of the moment. Cameras move constantly, capturing angles of perfection, the dress, the smiles, the carefully choreographed steps that seem almost unreal, as if everything has been rehearsed to the smallest detail. And for a while, it works. Everything appears flawless, a living fairy tale playing out under crystal light. But then, behind the scenes, beyond the reach of the brightest flashes, something else begins to surface. Subtle, almost invisible, yet enough for a few to notice. According to whispers shared quietly among those present, there are moments that don't quite match the perfection on display. A glance that lingers just a little too long, not filled with celebration, but something harder to read. A silence that cuts through the music for a split second, as if time itself hesitates. A pause between words that shouldn't be there, and then a small detail, easily overlooked, a glass left half full on a table, untouched, as conversations move on around it. As laughter rises and fades, that glass remains still, almost out of place, and somehow it draws attention. Because in a night designed to feel complete, even the smallest imperfection begins to matter. Emotions start to layer over one another. Happiness, real and visible. The kind that comes from finally reaching a moment long imagined. But alongside it, pressure, the weight of expectations, the awareness of every eye watching, every camera recording, every whisper ready to form. And beneath that, something deeper, something older, memories, not loud, not obvious, but present, like shadows that move quietly behind the light. Reminders of nights once spent in silence, of doubts once impossible to ignore. And for a brief moment, according to some who observed closely, Ini Edo's expression shifts, barely noticeable, a flicker, as if the past and present collide for just a second, before the smile returns, before the performance continues. And yet, that moment, however small, leaves a question hanging in the air, growing heavier with every passing second. Is this truly the happiness she fought so hard to find? Or is there a part of her still carrying the weight of everything that came before, still unsure, still searching, still trying to believe, even now, even here, in the middle of a night that was meant to be perfect? And then, the moment arrives. The exchange of rings. The music fades into a distant echo, as if the entire world holds its breath at once. The grand hall falls into a silence so complete, it almost feels unreal. Every eye fixed on them. Every camera frozen on a single frame. According to many who were present, this was the moment everything became unmistakably real. No more spectacle, no more distraction. Just two people, standing face to face. And yet, as Ini Edo lifts her gaze, there is something in her eyes, something deeper than joy, something that cannot be captured in photographs or explained in simple words. Because beneath the happiness, there appears to be another layer, a quiet intensity, a reflection of everything she has lived through. Some say it looked like fear, not fear of the moment, but fear of losing it, of watching something beautiful slip away again, just like before. Others believe it was memory, fragments of a past that refuses to disappear completely, echoes of nights filled with doubt, of promises that once felt certain, until they weren't. And for a brief second, it is as if all of that returns. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to be felt, enough to make the moment heavier than it should be. Philip stands beside her, steady, present, his hand closing gently around hers, a gesture that, to everyone watching, seems reassuring, grounding, like an anchor in the middle of an emotional storm. But even that raises a question, one that lingers quietly beneath the surface. Is it enough? Can a single presence, no matter how constant, truly erase everything that came before? Or does the past remain hidden, waiting, shaping every step forward in ways no one else can see? And as the rings are lifted, as they begin to slide into place, the tension reaches its peak. Pain, hope, anxiety, all colliding at once, a fragile balance between what was and what could be. The audience sees a fairy tale, a perfect union sealed under light and applause, a story of love that overcame time and doubt. But inside that moment, inside the silence that exists between each heartbeat, there may be something else entirely, something far more complex. Because while the world celebrates, the person at the center of it all may be fighting a quiet battle no one else can witness. A battle between holding on and letting go. Between trusting again and remembering why that once felt impossible. And as the ring finally settles into place, as the applause begins to rise again, there is a fleeting instant, almost invisible, where her expression softens, not into pure joy, but into something more uncertain, more human, as if she is standing at the edge of two worlds, one built on everything she has lost, and one that promises something new, and somewhere between those two, in that fragile space that exists only for a heartbeat, the question remains, unanswered, unresolved, lingering in the silence that follows. The night drifts slowly toward its final hours. The lights are still on, but no longer as dazzling as before. The glow softens, fading into something quieter, more fragile. Guests begin to leave one by one, their laughter dissolving into distant echoes, footsteps retreating down long corridors, according to some who remained until the very end. The energy of the evening changed almost imperceptibly, as if the celebration had reached its peak and gently slipped into something else. Something harder to define. Inside a quiet room away from the grand hall, the wedding dress now hangs alone, carefully placed, yet somehow carrying the weight of everything it has just witnessed, the fabric no longer moving, no longer alive with motion and light, just still, almost too still. And on a nearby table, the bouquet rests slightly tilted, as if it had been set down in a hurry, petals untouched, yet no longer held, no longer part of the moment it once completed. Outside, the media continues to speak in grand terms. The wedding of the century, a perfect night. Phrases repeated over and over, building an image that feels almost untouchable, almost flawless. But inside that space, beyond the reach of cameras and headlines, there is only silence, a deep, lingering silence that fills every corner. A chair left empty, pulled back just enough to suggest someone was there, and then wasn't. A glass untouched, placed carefully on the table, its surface reflecting the dimming light, as if waiting for a moment that never arrived. And in one very small corner of that quiet room, there is a feeling, subtle, almost impossible to describe, yet undeniably present, as though something remains unfinished, as though the story unfolding tonight, with all its beauty and all its weight, has not truly reached its end. Because beneath the celebration, beneath the vows and the promises, there are still questions, still emotions, still memories that have not fully settled. And as the final lights begin to dim, as the last echoes of music fade into nothing, that feeling lingers, quiet, persistent, like a whisper no one can quite hear, yet no one can completely ignore, as if somewhere, just beyond what can be seen, the story continues, waiting, unresolved, and not yet ready to let go.